Alright, now time for me to show you all of the wild, fun, wizardly things that you can do with watercolor. So, the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to do blooms on purpose. So a bloom is simply when an area of greater concentration of pigment touches another wet area and does that whole splurt out into it. So if I take, let's do purple in honor of the high holidays here. And if I had this purple that was wet, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to paint with this nice light purple, and I'm painting, oh, I touched it. I'm going to get a bloom like that. I can do that on purpose, like I just did now, where I could say, hey, what I really want is to have, let's do something applicable to interior design for y'all. A nice, I'm laying down this paint area of maybe like a countertop where I'm getting like this first layer down. And now I'm going to grab another color of brown. And maybe I want to have like a live edge or something that has like cool patterns coming through it, or maybe it's just been like a cool piece of wood that's cut in a weird way. And I could paint along this edge and like let it kind of bloom and diffuse into here so that it's kind of like the bark on a tree. So if this was like a cool live edge coffee table, this could be the start of that. And then I could add some blooms in here on purpose that later I'm going to come and make knots in the wood. In fact, I could even kind of sit here and just touch in the same place every now and then to create these knots and little ring-like shapes, and as it dries, that paint will travel less and less far. This could also be a good way to get a base texture for marble. So I'm going to come over here and grab just my grayish zone and lay down some marble colors. So I'll be honest, sometimes I'm doing a lot of wet on wet techniques, but I'll start technically with wet on dry. It's just so very wet that I have good, at this point, good water control. And I can know how much water I need to put down to fill the space I need and to keep it wet. So now if I want to do some marbly techniques where I'm going to want to introduce like some veining, I can come in with my smaller brush. When you're trying to paint smaller things, use a smaller brush. Don't get what I call one brush-itis, which is a disease that any watercolorist can get, where they only want to use one brush for the rest of their life, and they forget about all other brushes because you're just thinking brush, brush, brush. It's not a real disease, Jill. You looked terrified.
I heard disease and I heard paintbrush and I heard finished. I was like,
alright.
I've had brushes.
Nah, you're fine. You're fine. You can use the same brush, just don't use the same brush for painting your whole painting if it involves large and small things. Because it's not efficient. Okay. So now I'm going to put in just like a little line, and I'm going to let it just bloom out from this line and maybe even spatter a bit in here. So you can just take your, you might want to cover up anywhere on your paper where you don't want it to spatter if you're doing this. And come back in. I don't have a piece of marble I'm looking at as an example, so I might overdo it a little bit here. And I could come back in with just pure water and drop it in, and it will create some variation in the surface as well, or break up anywhere where I was like, ooh, it got like too blocky. Then I can wait for that to dry, come in and reinforce any line that I want. But I can use this diffusion and bloom to create variegated surfaces. Here I might come back in. I want that to be a nice knot that I can come in later. And I'm painting, once again, starting light, working towards the darkness. Let's see, what else can I do for funsies with watercolor?
Can you show us like some texture?
Yeah, some textures. Yeah.
So let's see, besides marble, like wood, wood grain?
Wood grain?
Really useful?
I'll come in and do some wood grain here when this is dry. One of the things is, when I'm showing you all textures, is it's going to be, okay, I did this layer. Now I'm going to let it dry for a while. I'll come and do like maybe like a shag ruggy type texture here or something. So you can do layers where I let my brush do a lot of the work for me, and I just kind of like dab it. Whoop, I grabbed some green there apparently.
Well, now it's a green blue, right?
Yep. And so I'll bring in these. You know, just build up the texture slowly. And then like I would come back in and do another layer where it would get even darker in some areas. Let's like pull from my box of textures. That will make it easier for me to actually choose something. Let's do maybe this grass cloth. Or like some wooden blind type things. Alright, grab some textures to look at. Alright, if I was doing something like these blinds, I would take my small brush, I would mix up my first color brown, which I want to be my lightest shade that I have in here, and I would come in and I would mix going thin by just using the very point of my brush, and going thicker by adding pressure. So you could even do some of that in the same line. And I would also be every now and then maybe grabbing an area on my palette that maybe has a little bit more pigment than the other and striping it through. And then I have a break where I have these larger pieces. I'm going to mix a little bit of like yellow into my brown here and paint in these larger pieces. And it's all about layers. So my first layer is just about getting those basic shapes in, and in this case some texture. But I'm not trying to get everything in all at once. I need to pull it down a little bit. There we go. And then I have another little bamboo thing here, but it's has a few more of this regular blind stuff in between. Okay. Well, some of this dries. I'm gonna add in, I think, a little bit of, I have some umber here, it looks like, that I could mix in to change the color just a bit. I should have sprayed this again. It's sitting in front of my fan, so it's drying out fast. And get in some of these darker areas in this, like, these sticks. And I'm doing this while this is still a little wet, partially so that it does some of the blending for me. And then in the areas where it's drier, I'm keeping my brush fairly dry, and I can get some dry brushing-esque technique where it starts running out of paint, and I can just dry brush in areas to get that, like, feathery mottled look. And you can also keep another piece of paper nearby to, like, brush off some extra pigment so that you can build up that dry brushing technique a little bit more. And then I have this nice, like, red ochre color. I'm going to wait. That's actually, like, decently dry now, since I have this fan blowing on me over here. Working in front of a fan is a nice way to get your watercolor to dry faster. If you're working on more dry techniques like this. Otherwise, if you don't want to dry faster, you want to be away from moving air. And then I'll come in with my brush and paint in these lines. And remember that they don't have to be painstaking. They can be representational. Yes. So you don't have to sit here and make it super painstaking, just so that you could recognize that this is indeed the same material. And they can be, like, really loose. That's part of the beauty of watercolor, is people will just let, like, very little tell them so much information. So, like, even if I just pull this along and kind of, like, dot this line,
Suggested line.
but just like a little suggestion, just a little zhuzh, it's still, people are gonna be like, yeah, that's right. And then I can come in if I want to and, like, get even a little extra with it and be like, okay, this is, like, where the bamboo meets. And ta-da, I have blinds. That's rendered enough for somebody to know what it is in that space. Similar with grass cloth, just doing it on a much smaller scale. Keep in mind, what's this going to look like from 6 feet away? Is it really going to look like we can read the individual strands? Probably not. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to here, I have a couple different colors laying next to each other, and I'm just going to grab them at random in this brown family and kind of just create a variegated wash where I'm just letting it do all of this fun nonsense. Creating all of that variation using wizardry. In here, when this dries, I can come in, do a few more of the streakiness across, maybe a little suggestion of the up and down weave, and call it a day. So I'll come back and do that here in a bit. I'll pause. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to tackle grass cloth, wood grain, marble. Maybe not in that order. We'll see. Okay, why not in that order? So the grass cloth, I'm going to come back and I'm just going to add in that striation. I'm going to use a mix of wet and then just dry brushing when I start running out of water, basically. I'll just move around as I'm running out of water. Maybe I'm going to work in from a fan from now on. This is so nice to be able to work this fast. At least during my demos. And this fan is so quiet. And it's a battery operated and rechargeable. I got it. Do y'all remember when like the power went out for like however many weeks in the summer last year? We were without power for 7 days, and then they called and told us it was going to be 10 days, and more days. And I said, we're going to my parents' house in Kearney. And then we threw out everything out of our freezer that we'd been buying ice for and packing into. And then the power came on in about 5 minutes before we were left. Right, we got the call that day that it was going to be 10 more days. And then
I, like clockwork, managed to leave the country every time the power went out.
Oh, well, that's lovely.
My poor dog sitter. It's just
oh no,
terrifying.
So then I might come in and just add in some of this texture. Just doing my itsy bitsies. I might not even go this far if I feel like I'm not going to read that texture from that different. I'm just going to come in and add in a few more fine lines in that darker color. And I could even bring in a straight edge and paint along it as well. Alright, wood grain. So wood grain here, we're going a long wood grain. And I'm going to follow the edge that I let it create for me when I did this little blooming technique. And I am just going to bring this out and around. I'm going to redefine some of those. And I'm going to do this lighter pass. And then I can mix up a darker with like maybe my burnt umber. And come in and put in some darker colors just through here. I can also work on dry brushing through there to get some color built up as well. And marble, a lot of my like little veining kind of went kaput as it dried, but it gave me a nice base to work from. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for along where those lines are. And I'm just going to follow, because the water is going to give me so much more of like a natural fluid line than I could come up with on my own. So letting your watercolor do a lot of the work for you and make some of those decisions for you. And then I can do more of the splattering on top of it. What I would do if I wanted to add in white on top of this, to add in like a bright white vein, is I would either take the gel pen or I would take a little bit of white gouache and go over it. Because especially when we're rendering for interior or fashion, I don't see it as a sin to put gouache on your watercolor. I'm like, that's smart. Don't spend all your time trying to avoid little tiny areas in a little tiny drawing. Just come in and bring in your highlights and gouache. It's not like we're trying to enter this into a watercolor competition or anything.
Do you ever use metallic watercolors?
Metallic watercolors? I have one that I really like, and it is right here. It is this gold. It is from Schmeinecke, I believe. And it is the only gold watercolor I've ever had that I actually feels like looks like gold when it dries. And it looks like gold leaf once it's dry. You need to do about 2 layers of it to get it, or you need to have an underlayer of something underneath of it that sets that tone for you, and I would do like a bright yellow.
On Amazon, Windsor and Newton have a pan metallic set for 23. And then they've got
I don't know about their metallics.
but they also have like a 24 half pan for 37.
What colors does it say?
They sure do.
If I remember correctly, they leave white in.